Hi, everyone. This is the 50 States Highpointing podcast and YouTube channel. What started off as a project for a communications class has turned into something that I actually love doing. I have the privilege of providing the platform for people to talk about the extraordinary things they do in the outdoors. Highpointing is the challenge of reaching the highest elevation in each of the 50 states. Highpointers don't get paid for their hobby. No one is sponsored by an outdoor company, and people fit this challenge into their everyday lives that also include careers and family. I found through these interviews that people who attempt this challenge are incredible and genuinely enjoy talking about their experiences. If you consider yourself a Highpointer and you want to share your story on this podcast or interview, please send me an email at 50stateshighpointingpodcast@gmail.com. It has been a pleasure speaking with every Highpointer. I hope you enjoy. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 50 States Highpointing podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and the Highpointer we're speaking with today is Mihai from California. Welcome to the show, Mihai.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Likewise. Great to have you. Mihai is a first-generation Romanian American, and he lives in Bishop, California, and enjoys not just highpointing, but every aspect of adventure and bringing friends along the way. So, Mihai, can you tell the listeners a little bit about your background in Romania and in this country and how you got into the outdoors?
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, first of all. So I was born and raised in Romania, Eastern Europe. And when I was 16, my family emigrated to the United States, and we settled in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles area, which is where I finished my high school education. And afterward, I went on to attend UC Berkeley, and also in the state of California, for 4 years, where I got my bachelor's degree. After which, I moved back to Los Angeles with my family. I was able to get a job at that time, and that created all this free time for me, where I finally had a steady income and not a lot to do. So I kind of started hiking, exploring, and that led me to eventually get into more technical hiking, longer stuff. And I started highpointing with my state highpoint, which is Mount Whitney. So I can go into that detail a little later.
Perfect. So you really started in the outdoors then in the Los Angeles area.
That's correct. I actually did not have an extensive outdoor background when I was in Romania.
Okay.
I went to school and kind of came of age right as Romania was transitioning out of the communist period, which was in the 90s.
Okay.
So people were still trying to figure things out at that time. And my family was busy trying to make a living, trying to figure things out themselves. And then eventually an opportunity got us to the United States. So that kind of like changed everything.
Yeah, that's cool. So let's talk about how you got into the outdoors. Now, your first high point was Mount Whitney, and that's pretty cool that it's your first. Can you talk about some other peaks that you've done in California before you got into highpointing?
So yeah, before I got into highpointing, I didn't really do that much peak bagging, which is the activity that I seriously engage in right now. But I set Mount Whitney as my goal in 2009. And leading up to that, I did a series of hikes in Southern California where I set as my goals the range high points for the three major ranges surrounding Southern California, a metropolitan area, which are Mount San Antonio or Baldy, Mount San Gorgonio and the San Bernardino Mountains, and Mount San Jacinto out by Palm Springs. So I remember doing those over a series of weekend hikes over the summer of 2009. And then finally in August of that year, I did a backpacking trip to Mount Whitney, which was successful, but I learned a lot of lessons the hard way that way.
Oh, that's awesome. I've been on San Gorgonio, and that is a beautiful hike. I camped at the campsite right before the summit, and it was just such a beautiful night, and it was such a beautiful sunset. I mean, everything was just so incredible. I will never forget that.
Yeah, I think when people think of California and especially Los Angeles, they don't really know about the natural features surrounding the area. They think of beaches, warm
Hmm.
weather, but there are some very serious mountains and mountain ranges, especially in Southern California. So that was one of my great discoveries while I lived there. We have
Hmm.
this amazing backyard that we can explore, and I did that over the course of 10 years while I lived in Los Angeles. If I remember right, I climbed San Gorgonio 13 times, San Antonio 16, and San Jacinto 25 times.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and
Okay.
I've done them in all seasons and via all routes. So I
Cool.
I thoroughly explored my backyard while I was living there.
You did. And those mountains get all the seasons too. I drove from Yuma, where I live, to San Gorgonio one weekend. And, I was taking, I think it's I-10 through
Hmm.
Palm Springs. And you're in the desert. There's the Coachella Valley. There's date farms everywhere. And then you're in the beautiful San Bernardino wilderness and just surrounded by trees everywhere. And there's a little snow up there too. When I was there, there was.
That's right. They're high enough to receive snow every winter, and also the
Hmm.
Pacific Crest Trail crosses all these mountain ranges. So you have a lot of traffic through them, and also a lot of people coming in from the LA area to climb. So
Hmm.
it was really a blessing to be able to visit these areas and have the experiences I had. So I started off that way, like everyone else, kind of learning along the way. And then as I gain more experience, I move on to the Sierra Nevada mountains and then eventually to other states and now other countries.
So, talk about your trip up Mount Whitney. Now, you said you learned a lot of lessons. Can you talk about how you learned those lessons? Love those stories.
Sure. Right. So I had no idea about the permit system at the time for day hikes.
Oh, okay.
So I decided I had just started backpacking as well, so I didn't have a lot of experience that way either. But I
Hmm.
was like, I have to climb this mountain, and I want to do it now, and I trained for it. So I obtained a permit for a trailhead north of Mount Whitney called Shepherd Pass. And for
Okay.
people who know this trailhead, they know it's one of the four infamous passes in the Sierra because they start on the east side very low and they gain a lot of elevation in a short amount of mileage. So it's one of the more difficult passes, and I didn't know that at the time. So I was with two others, and we set off on a 6-day trip. Um, I had never been above, what was it, 11,500, which is what Mount San Gorgonio is.
Hmm.
Um, and the pass itself is 12,000. So
Okay.
that was the first lesson, getting over that and dealing with the altitude.
Hmm.
And then on day 5, we got to the top of Mount Whitney. It was August 21st, 2009. I still remember that date. Um, and I was pretty hammered by the altitude. I remember that too, because um, I remember signing my name in the register at the base of the cabin.
Yeah.
And then as I was sitting on the rocks taking in the views, a guy in a chicken suit comes up. And, I have to rub my eyes to make sure that I'm seeing this right. I'm like, I can't be affected by the altitude that much.
You're like
So the guy
hallucinating.
shows up in a chicken suit, like a rubber chicken suit. Um, he does his thing and then takes off. And I'm like, I didn't take a picture of this. So I rush over to the register. I take a picture of the register. And I still have that. And the guy wrote, I did it in a chicken suit. So
You
I
did.
have
Yeah.
evidence for that. But that is one of my stories. First time at 14,000 feet, affected by altitude. I never had an issue after that. So,
Cool. Well, that area is so beautiful. Again, the Eastern Sierras.
yeah, it is amazing. And you mentioned that I live in Bishop, and I've been here for 5 years at this point. So, it's amazing to be able to have the Sierra Nevada mountains on one side, the White Mountains on the other side.
Hmm.
And anytime I want to like go and train, I just, look out the door, look out the window, I see the conditions, I hop in my car and I'm off to the trailhead.
That's incredible. So, what got you into high pointing specifically? Now, we know you like to peak bag, and we'll get into that, but how did you know that high pointing was a thing?
I actually did not know until I climbed Mount Whitney. So I had set Whitney as my goal, like I described. I was successful in climbing it on that long backpacking trip back in 2009. And that kind of made me wonder once I got home, what are the other state high points? I've done California, so I met this challenge. I wonder what else is out there. So that's how I came across the Highpointers Club, of which I've been a member since 2009 or 10. I can't remember at this point.
Cool.
But I remember finding their website, signing up for a membership at that point, and then through them, I found out what the other high points were.
Okay. Have you ever been to any of the High Pointers Club conventions?
That's what I was actually going to say right now. Even though I've been a member for all this time, since 2009 or 10, I have not actually attended a convention yet. So,
you'll have to go this year.
I know. And I think a couple of years ago, the convention was in California, and it was in Bishop, of all places. Oh. And for whatever reason, I forgot about it, or I had scheduled something else, and I did not attend that. So I feel ashamed of myself, but I will try to make it to a convention at some point soon.
Yeah, I want to go to the one this year in Georgia. So maybe we'll meet there.
Hopefully. We'll see how the summer schedule works out.
Yeah, right. So now you find out about high pointing through the High Pointers Club. You become a member. Talk about when you got into the car and started driving to other high points and seeing the rest of the country.
Sure. So once I found out about the other high points, being in California, I kind of made a commitment to climb the hardest ones first. So I wanted to start with the Western states, knock those out, and then kind of make my way east.
Okay.
So that was the progression I followed in the first, I want to say 8 years. And I also set a goal for myself of doing at least one of those Western high points per year. So from 2009 through 2019, I climbed at least one per year. So I did the big ones. And we can get into detail about those. But the only year where I didn't succeed in doing that was 2013. And that's my only failure so far. It took me 2 tries to do Mount Hood. And the first one was in 13. And now looking back on it, I was like, at the time, I was like, I'm just going to stick with the Western ones and not worry about the others. I should have done an easier one that year just to fill in my gap. Now I can't go back and have that. So it is what it is.
So was it a weather issue that kept you from the summit on Mount Hood?
It was. We went in May that year. It was towards the end of May, kind of Memorial Day weekend. And we got there, and the day before our summit attempt, a late winter storm dropped about half a foot of fresh snow on the mountain. So even though we had gone up to one of the highest ski hut, I think it's Palmer, or I can't remember right now. On the day of our actual attempt, we got to the base of the Hog's Back, which is that hump right before you start climbing the chutes. Yeah. And I remember this. We had been post-holing for hours. Post-holing is when you sink in. Everyone was tired. The wind was blowing. It was super cold. And we get to the base of the Hog's Back. I take one step to start going up that thing, and I feel the whole slope going so.
Oh no!
At that point, I was like, you know what? I'm done. It's time to turn around. Yeah, the avalanche danger was just too high.
Sure. Were you with a guide?
I was not. I was with my team, and I should have said this. In addition to doing all these Western state high points first, I made a commitment to do them unguided. So I climbed everything on my own with my team. So I never used a guide, and I don't intend on doing so.
Who is your team?
I have friends that I've met along the way. So to back up a little bit, when I started hiking in Los Angeles after coming back, I didn't know how to meet people. So I came across meetup.com, which is a website where there were a lot of groups formed. This was back in pre-Facebook days when people were actually getting organized and, putting together events on other platforms. So Meetup was my introduction to backpacking, and I met a lot of people through a meetup group that I eventually ended up running in the Los Angeles area. So
Cool.
as Meetup died down, I kept in touch with many of these folks, and then throughout the years, we went and climbed mountains in different combinations. So I would just reach out to them and be like, hey, I want to climb this. Do you guys want to come along? And people would say yes or no. So depending on that, I would just form a team.
Yeah, that's really cool. So can you talk about doing Rainier in Montana and Granite Peak and some of those more difficult Western peaks?
Absolutely. So Rainier is one of my most challenging climbs to date. I did that one in 2014, and as training for it, I did the Mountaineers route on Mount Whitney in spring conditions. So Rainier was it was scheduled for June, and then we did the Mountaineers route on Whitney successfully in March of that year. So that got us ready kind of for the snow camping aspect because we were planning to snow camp on Rainier Camp Muir. But the weather was really bad. It was mid-June. I kind of decided to go early on that one because I didn't want to deal with the crevasses opening up. So that was one of the advantages of going early. However, the weather is more unpredictable that early in the season. So it was a gamble. We rolled the dice, and we made it. But it was actually very unusual because down low at Paradise, which is where the road ends and where the ranger station is, or where everyone starts, it was socked in. There were clouds everywhere. It was kind of like drizzling, snowing, so you couldn't see up above you. So we're trying to make the decision on whether or not we should go for it based on the weather report from the ranger station. And at some point, someone said, let's just go for it. So we did. Our goal was to go get to Camp Muir on day one. And as we started climbing up the Muir snowfield, we got out of the clouds. And at Camp Muir is clear. So it was an inversion. Everything was socked in down below, but it was clear up above. So day two, weather looks good still on day two. And we go for it. It was a 13-hour summit day. I still remember it. We were 2 ropes, so 4. We kind of stayed on the heels of guided groups that had started ahead of us. Some of those groups had camped higher up. There's a higher camp on Ingraham Glacier called Ingraham Camp. So,
I stayed there.
So you know where it is. But basically, we just stayed on the heels of the groups. The crevasses were not an issue, which I was happy about. I think the biggest one was about 3 feet across, and you could just step over it with a big step. But other than that, it was not an issue. So we got to the crater rim, where everyone kind of like on ropes. That's where the guided groups kind of stopped. We took off our rope. We went to Columbia Crest, which is the actual high point. And then we made our way back down. But as we were making our way back down, the storm rolled in that had been predicted. So I remember navigating back to camp, even though we were just following the footsteps, and the path. I was navigating by GPS. It was the whiteout. So I was always like looking at my GPS to make sure we weren't taking a wrong turn anywhere. And I remember we started at 1 a.m. We got back to camp at 2 p.m. So it was a 13-hour summit day. And I think I had 1 sip of water in that whole time.
Oh no.
It was that cold, and our water froze. Basically, people's water just froze in the bottles. Containers. So yeah, it was an extreme effort by any means. And then day 3, we just got down safely, but it was intense.
Wow, that is intense. I was up on Rainier in August, and it was a little hot. Obviously when the sun was out, The crevasses were wide. They had to tie a couple ladders together so that we can cross. And I didn't drink enough water, but, we would stop once an hour for 10 minutes. And the guides were like, you have to drink water. You have to eat, even if you're not thirsty, even if you're not hungry. And I should have listened. But on the way to the summit, I was like, okay, I know we're stopping, but I'm not thirsty. Like, I'm not going to drink anything. But I got a dehydration headache on the way down. And then the sun was just so strong up there. We were in our gear from the summit. We're all sweating on the way down. And we stopped at Camp Muir. And I changed into shorts. And, or no, not shorts. I kept my pants on because I wanted to glissade down. But I put on a short sleeve shirt. Because it was so hot. And, that's only 2 months after you were there. Obviously not the same year, but the weather is just so unpredictable up there.
It is. And I remember a couple of years ago, I don't remember if it was 21 or 22, when that huge dome of high pressure was over the Pacific Northwest. I think they recorded the highest temperatures ever at the summit of Rainier, which was above freezing. And that's kind of mind-blowing for me. So I can totally see that. But yeah, when we were there, it was frigid. And, I was wearing like 2 sets of gloves. My hands were freezing. I could barely take pictures with my camera.
Wow. I
had an actual camera then, not a phone camera. So it was very intense. Yeah, like I was wearing a balaclava just covering all of my face and my goggles.
Wow.
Because the wind was so intense, it was like making your eyes tear up.
When you mentioned Ingraham Flats, that's where we slept the second night, right before the summit. And on the packing list, they told us to bring 0-degree sleeping bags. And I didn't. I brought a 25-degree sleeping bag. And I was a little scared. I'm like, what if I get too cold? Oh no, what am I going to do? I was sweating up there at 11,300 feet in August.
That's pretty wild.
I was kicking the sleeping bag off all night. And I mean, I didn't sleep at all. So it was a really long day. But it was an unusually hot season in 2021, and they ended it early. They had some climbs scheduled for early September that they had to cancel just because of the conditions up there and all the snow melting.
Right. That's something that I experienced last year on Mont Blanc in France. We went in August. And it was so hot and the rockfall was so bad that they actually closed down the mountain about 2 weeks after we were there. So we just got that one in.
Yeah, the rockfall was really bad in that bowling alley section of Rainier. It was like, I don't know what it's like during the rest of the season, but where we stayed in Ingraham Flats, you can hear that all night, those boulders falling. And when the boulders aren't falling, there's just this steady stream of just scree falling. And then occasionally there would be an avalanche. It obviously didn't come down to where we were. I think a lot of it like fell into a crevasse or something. But those are so loud. I did not know that.
They are terrifying too, yes.
Yeah. You did Rainier once.
I did Rainier once, yes. I repeated some of the other ones, but not that one. I do have plans on going back at some point and doing a different route. I want to do the Emmons Glacier route, which is from the east side.
So can you talk about Granite and Gannett peaks?
Yep, I'll move on to those. I did Gannett in 2016, and I did Granite in 2018. So a little later than Rainier. But Gannett was a 5-day trip, and I opted to do it from the west side, which is the longer approach. Most people come in from the east side. That's just a little bit shorter, but I wanted to do the longer route because we set our camp in Titcomb Basin, which is a fabulous area of the Wind River Range that contains Gannett. And Titcomb really did remind me of the Sierra, my home range right here in California.
Okay.
It was beautiful granite everywhere, like blue lakes, greenery. Wow. It was just incredible. So I wanted to have that experience, but I knew it was going to make it harder. And this was a July trip, so conditions were very good. the main thing with the western route, with the western approach on Gannett, is that you have to climb over a 12,000-foot pass called Bonnie Pass.
Okay.
And that was a full-on crampons and ice axe ascent early in the morning when it was icy. We got over that, and then you dropped down onto another glacier that you used to approach the Gooseneck Glacier, which is the main route up Gannett. So that was a 16-hour summit day. It was very hard. The weather was perfect, though. We didn't have any issues. I did have one team member who slipped coming down Bonnie Pass down to camp because we were so tired. He tried to self-rest, and unfortunately he wasn't able to dig in the axe hard enough, so it was yanked out of his hands. And he was just able to stop with his hands and with his crampons as he was going down. So that was a little scary to see that happening. We got to him in time. We got him his ice axe. He was able to complete the descent. But it was just one of those things that reminds you, you always have to pay attention. And it kind of reinforced the thing that accidents always happen on the way down. So,
right.
You have to always be on guard. So that was fabulous. The only thing about Gannett that I regret is not bringing a pair of hiking boots. I did the whole thing in my mountaineering boots, and I had horrible blisters at the end. So do not do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So how about Montana?
Montana. That one was pretty good. We also lucked out with the weather. That was in August of 2018. I really enjoyed driving, Beartooth Highway, I think, is the route in southern Montana that kind of goes into Wyoming and then pops back out into Montana because Granite is at the southern edge of the state. And the one the thing I remember most about Granite is we camped at Arrow Lakes. No. Was it Arrow? It was Skytop Lakes. I'm sorry, Skytop Lakes.
Okay.
And going up the canyon of Skytop Creek, the wildflowers were in bloom. So it was a beautiful display of colors everywhere because there was so much water. And the climb itself was fantastic. We did not have to use any snow gear. We did the Southwest Couloir route. I'm sorry. So that has a scramble, and we were lucky enough to find a rope set up at the choke point, which is where the couloir gets super narrow. It had been set up by previous parties, and that helped both going up and down that very narrow part, especially down because it's a 10-foot drop at that choke point, and it's full of water that collects from above it, and it also funnels all the rockfall. So it's a super sketchy area. You don't want to be there any longer than you have to. It was just us and one other party doing that route that day. They went before us. And on the way down, we were a party of 4. And on the way down, I remember going down third. I used the rope to lower myself down. And then as I was waiting for the 4th person to come down, I wanted to get out of the way, but I didn't do so fast enough, so he dislodged a baseball-sized rock that hit me in my thigh, and that hurt pretty bad. And it was only a 10-foot drop, so that was one of the more painful memories. But I was really happy to get through that section because it was very sketchy. Yeah, that is definitely a location, a spot where you don't want people to hesitate. You want to make sure everyone does what they need to do and get out of there as fast as you can because it really is super dangerous. And then in addition to that, as you may know, and as I'm sure some of the listeners know, Granite is renowned for its thunderstorms. So in the afternoon, clouds roll in, thunder starts hitting, you want to hightail it out of there. So we got back to camp just in time, and we could see that the peak itself was getting hit. With thunder and some rain.
Wow. So what are your favorite West Coast peaks that you've done?
That's kind of a loaded question. I've been thinking about it as I was preparing for the podcast. I guess my favorites were the ones I happened to be doing at the time at that time. So
Hmm.
um, Idaho Bora was a good one because I remember another one of your guests talking about the eclipse. I was there at the same time.
You were?
Um,
Oh my gosh.
I was in 2017. I actually
Wow.
climbed the peak 2 days before the eclipse because I didn't want to be there with all the other people.
Okay.
And we had selected like a different spot that we were going to camp because I was with some photographer friends and they wanted to have their gear all set up and record the eclipse. So we
Hmm.
decided to do the peak 2 days before. But yeah, it was a very memorable trip because of the eclipse, obviously, and then also like dealing with the logistical challenges um,
Hmm.
and then there were wildfires going on at the time, so that kind of
Oh yeah.
obscured things. It made you like wonder, will I be able to see stuff? Will I be able to
Hmm.
view the eclipse? But in the end, it all worked out. So it was a fun trip. It was a memorable one.
That's so interesting. And that was, I think, episode 9 with James. He was a photographer, actually, up there taking a
Right.
picture of the eclipse. That's so cool. Hmm.
I was looking at the 2024 eclipse, which is coming up, and I was looking at the path of totality for that one, and it goes right over Katahdin in Maine. So that may be
Oh,
something high pointers would want to think about for that one.
yeah. How cool. Oh my gosh. So, what's the furthest east that you've gone in your high pointing endeavors?
I have actually done high points coast to coast. So
Okay.
um, last year I took a road trip from Los Angeles to Wilmington, Delaware, and
Oh,
I knocked out a bunch of states along the way. So um, I did Oklahoma, Missouri. I kind of wanted to like make a huge stretch and just go
hmm,
coast to coast. So I did Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, um, Illinois. No, not Illinois. Ohio, Indiana, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and then I repeated Delaware. My easternmost states and high points are Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware right now.
if you could redo a high point, either because you liked it so much or because you want another shot at it, which one would it be?
I've already done a few of them. I've repeated a few.
Hmm.
So I've done Whitney 4 times, and I've done Downread 3 times because I almost can see it from my bedroom window.
That's right. Yeah.
It's just north of here, so I've done that one, and my family owns a house that is just 200 feet away from Ebright, Azimuth in Delaware. So
Okay.
that's an easy bag.
Hmm.
But in terms of repeating stuff, I'm trying to think which ones I didn't have views on. I think I had views on all of them. I would probably like do Hood again, just so I can get another, revenge on it. And that one has amazing views. I did come back from Hood and I climbed it in 2015, so that was awesome.
Okay, cool. Were there any peaks that didn't go according to plan?
Yeah, so obviously Hood is I already mentioned it.
Sure.
The late winter storm kind of like nixed that one, but no, I've been lucky enough to be able to get all my peaks done on the first attempt. So
Okay.
in that regard, I can't say that things didn't go according to plan because they did. So I can't tempt fate. But another one I would like to redo, and I just remember this right now to answer the previous question. I would like to do
Hmm.
Albert again.
Okay.
That was an overcast day. It was also in 2014, and I did it on no sleep after having arrived in Denver following a wedding. So
Okay.
um, it was a wedding in California. It happened to be over Labor Day weekend. So I attended a wedding that Friday. Then early the next day on Saturday, I flew into Denver. I spent the day with my friend there, and then on Sunday we went to climb Albert. So I was very tired. It did not helped that we did some, adult activities, along the way.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was very tired and I barely got myself up there. So that one I would like to do again because, just for a better experience. I mean, I enjoyed it the way it was, but I feel like I could have better views, like better weather, and just like
Sure.
something more memorable.
Sure. So now I'd like to get into your peak bagging. And before we do that, I want the listeners to know just a little story. Before guests come on the podcast, I do send them an outline of how the podcast is structured. And part of that outline, I introduce myself and where I live and what I do, etc. And I am from Yuma, Arizona. And I live close to a national wildlife refuge called COFA. And not a lot of people know about it. And that's what I love about it. We can always find a camp spot there. There's great hikes and you won't run into anyone. Well, when I sent Mihai the outline, he says, "Oh, have you ever been to COFA? I went there and I climbed the highest peak." And I said, "What? Of course I've done that. And I have never met anyone else who's done that." And now we're talking about, 4,000 feet, but these hikes are rugged. And there's no sign telling you where to go. You just have to have a good sense. You have to have looked at a map before or have downloaded some kind of GPS system or a map from All Trails or something on your phone. And you might see some wildlife along the way. I didn't. I think I saw a couple scorpions and tarantulas. But it is, I think, everything that I love about this part of the state of Arizona. It's just rugged and beautiful and quiet. So I was so surprised, and I was also happy to hear that I'm going to talk to someone else who's climbed Signal Peak. So all that to say, Mihai is an avid peak bagger. He does not only do high points, but he bags peaks, and those are measured by prominence, which he can talk about. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your peak bagging?
Sure. Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, Signal Peak, since you started with that, is one of my favorite desert climbs.
Yeah.
And in California, being in California, like one of the great things about living here is the diversity of terrain that you can encounter. So during winter, which is when most of these desert peaks get done, a lot of people go out skiing, they go out snow playing, whatever. I prefer to go out to the desert because that gives me an opportunity to climb more stuff. So Signal was on one of those desert trips during the winter, and it was a fabulous experience. Saw a lot of bighorn sheep. So those are very rare animals that you can come across. That's another reason why it was memorable. But yes, I kind of got through hiking and high pointing and backpacking into this whole hobby of peak bagging, which is just reaching high points and summits that have, for whatever criteria you select, are meaningful to you. So I kind of expanded my interest that way, and that's kind of what I'm doing right now. And one of the main criteria for me is this concept of prominence, which is vaguely or roughly defined. It gets more technical, as prominence for a peak is the distance from its summit to the lowest point between that peak and the next highest summit. So it's a way of measuring a mountain that doesn't necessarily take in an absolute value like elevation. So it's basically a measurement of the mountain, how much it stands out, what's impressive about it. It's an impressiveness measurement. So I kind of like that metric a lot more than just elevation, because a lot of people do climb the highest things, but sometimes the most prominent things are more fun, even though they may not be the highest. So I kind of went along with that, and I've done a lot of other things along the way. One that I'm especially proud of is I climbed all 58 California county high points, and I've also climbed all 58 California county prominence points. So not just the highest elevation in each county, but also the most prominent peak. So I am one of a handful of people that has done that.
Can you tell our listeners what you do for a living. You don't have to tell us where you work, but I think that it does. I think it connects to your passion for these measurements in different peaks.
It does. That is true. So the technical term is Geographic Information Systems Specialist. And in simpler terms, I'm a cartographer. I'm a geographer. I make maps and I do spatial analysis. So that is my job for my employer. And I do all of this in the context of construction projects. So it was something that I discovered that was my passion as a profession, and I've been able to combine that with my passion for the outdoors and my interest in geography to kind of like pull them all together. And that's why I'm here. That's what I'm doing,
That is so cool. So how did you find out that you were only one of a handful to do the county high points in California? Is there a register?
The way most people keep track of these things is through a website called peakbagger.com. A lot of the listeners know about the website because it also has an amazing app that people use on their phones to reach their goals, whether they are high pointing goals or whatever. So the Peak Bagger application is amazing, but it also pulls from the database that feeds the website. So on peakbagger.com, people are tracked depending on what they log for their ascents. And I know based on that database that I am one of the 5 or so people that have completed this list. So
that's awesome.
It is a badge of honor for me, and I really wanted to do this for my home state because this is where I lived basically the entire time since I came to the U.S.
So what's your next high point?
Good question. I've been thinking about this for 2023 because I have to get my high point in, at least
that's
one
right.
of them. So there are a couple of options. I left through my trips. North Dakota, White Butte kind of got left out. I was never able to combine with anything. So now it is what we call an orphan. It's kind of sitting there by itself. So I have nothing to combine it with. So I have to like either make a trip just for it or combine it with like some, national park high points in South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana. So that's an option. And then I haven't really done much in the South. So I'm thinking of just flying into New Orleans and then doing, a big loop through Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas, like get those out of the way.
Cool. That sounds fun.
It does. And I'm not sure about most other people, but I already kind of decided on what my last one will be.
What is it?
So I'm going to leave Texas for my last one.
Why is that?
I just love the state of Texas, and Guadalupe is a prominent peak, and it's also a desert-like peak, so I kind of enjoy that. It doesn't have to be necessarily done during a specific time of the year, even though I know it gets hot in the summer, but it is an option that can be done at more, at more times of the year. So, yeah, I like Texas. I have a lot of friends in Texas, so I think that's an adequate endpoint for me to finish on Guadalupe whenever.
Very symbolic. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So you're obviously planning on doing Denali then at some point.
That's right. Yeah. Denali is on the schedule probably for 2024 at this point. It's a huge undertaking, as everyone knows. And I and my team are planning to go unguided, like I mentioned earlier. So there is actually a lot of work that goes into the planning, the logistics, and the training. So it's basically a full-time job, which is very hard to manage by most people. So I'm still trying to find the balance there between my job, my work, and my peak bagging. So my family to be able to accommodate that. So it's still a work in progress, but we're shooting for next year. I really enjoyed the road trip that I did last year because it allowed me to basically cross the whole country and experience it in ways that most people don't. So I was fortunate enough to have the time to be able to do that. It took 8 days. And it just, we talk about bubbles, people living in bubbles, especially on the coast and so on. So just being able to go out there in the middle of the country and like see how people live there and like what they do and like how things are set up, even though you're just driving through, like it was an amazing experience for me. So like, it kind of opened my eyes to like how the country is set up and like what people really do and how they think and how they behave too. So it was amazing. Really quickly give people like an idea of the things that I'm doing. So I mentioned Mont Blanc, which I did last year. And I've been in countries like Georgia, Turkey. I've been in Chile, Mexico. I climbed the highest mountain in Mexico.
Pico de Orizaba?
Pico de Orizaba, yeah. And I did several other volcanoes in Mexico. I've done stuff in Romania and in India. And this year I might go to Bolivia or Ecuador. So...
Oh, are you going to do the Ecuador volcanoes? That's fun.
The Ecuadorian volcanoes, yeah. So there are a lot of things outside of the United States that are just amazing. So I feel incredibly fortunate to be able to experience what I have experienced in the United States, and then also be able to go further and see the world too.
Have you reached the Romanian high point?
I have.
Cool.
I have, and that it was important to me because where I'm from, for that to be my first country high point. So I was able to accomplish that in 2021. So
cool.
That is like one of my proudest moments. So
before we wrap up this episode, there are two questions that I like to finish off each episode with. And one is, can you tell the listeners, what are your favorite outdoor adventure documentaries, podcasts, or books?
Oh boy, I have a whole library of mountaineering books.
Oh, me too.
So in terms of books, one of my favorites is Reinhold Messner's account of how he climbed Everest solo. That book is called The Crystal Horizon. Another tidbit of information is in 2015, I attended the American Alpine Club convention in New York City. I'm also a member of the American Alpine Club. And he was the featured speaker at that convention. So I actually met him, and I have a picture with Reinhold Messner. So,
wow. That's amazing. That's so cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Messner is one of my heroes, and I always recommend his book. I think Nimsdai Purja, the Nepali climber, is also an incredible athlete and an inspiration to many. And then another author that I really like is Gerlinde Kaltenbrunner, which is an Austrian mountaineer and the first woman to climb the 8,000 meter peaks without oxygen. So she is incredible. I also met her in person when I was living in LA.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You have so many unique opportunities to meet these people. That's awesome. Do you have any favorite documentaries that you like about mountain climbing or outdoor adventure?
The one that everyone hopefully has watched is 14 Peaks, Nimsdai's account. I think, if I remember right, Werner Herzog, who is a famous German filmmaker, has a documentary about Reinhold Messner from back in the 70s and 80s when he did his most famous accomplishment. So I would highly recommend that too. I have a whole lot of others that I can't remember right now, but I would be happy to share them in a future edition.
Yes, that's awesome. I like to close out each episode by asking guests, what are the benefits that you get on a personal level from high pointing or peak bagging?
For me, the diversity of everything. So when I moved to the United States with my family as an immigrant, I was positively impressed about how diverse people are in California. And I feel that has enriched my life tremendously. I am the person that I am today because I had these experiences and these interactions with people from a variety of backgrounds, and with a variety of life experiences. And in a way, I feel like the high points are a reflection of America in general, because there's really high ones, there's really tough ones, there's easy ones, just like people. So
Yeah.
I tremendously enjoy this pursuit. It gives me the opportunity to see all the states, to have experiences in every one of those states, and just to like meet others along the way. So I feel like that's how this has contributed to my life. That's why I like doing it. That's why I want to keep doing it. And I hope everyone, finds what they're looking for from the activities. So.